Yes, let's give it up for them. Wasn't that awesome? Yes. Well, good morning and welcome to Kensington. We're so glad that you have joined us today. And that incredible piece of music that you just heard was written by those artists that you saw in the video. And those guys are from Palestine, and they wrote that and they played that along with our incredible band. And we thought today would be a perfect day to share that with you, as Palestine and Israel are one of our global partners here at Kensington. And today is week 2 of our series, Why Bible? And much of the Bible takes place right in that part of the world. So we wanted to share that with you. Well, my name is Shauna, and I'm the production manager here at Clinton Township. And I just want to say, if it's your first time here today, we are so glad that you have joined us, and we'd love the opportunity to be able to meet you. So I'd invite you to stop by the hub after service. The hub is located in the middle of the lobby. You'll see some people wearing some orange t-shirts there, and really it's a place for you to get connected. You can ask questions, you can discover more about Kensington, and just really help you get to know who we are and what this place is all about. So I'd encourage you to stop by there after service. Now, also out in the hub, by the hub today in the lobby, you will see our McCrest table. McCrest is the Macomb County Rotating Emergency Shelter Team. Whew, got through that. And so we have partnered with them for the last 11 years and just providing a safe, warm place for homeless women and their children to stay for a week. And this has been an incredible partnership, and we are so looking forward to having them here again at the end of this month. But here's the deal, guys. We need you. We are looking for people that can jump in and volunteer and help make this happen. We really can't do it without volunteers and people like you. And there's so many different ways that you can help out. You can do from check-in to cleanup to providing meals. There's so many different ways. So I would encourage you, stop by the table after service, ask the team some questions, and sign up today. We really need you to help make that happen. Now, today we started our service by listening to that incredible music from one of our global partners. Another global partner that we have is in Kenya, and we have been working in Kenya to provide clean drinking water to the Pokot people. And just this past June, we had our 5K run, and through that, we were able to provide 2 new wells, you guys. That is so incredible, and we're so excited for what we are doing through Hope Water Project. And here in a couple weeks is the Detroit Marathon, and we have a ton of people that are going to be running and being a part of that. And they've been working tirelessly, not just to train for the marathon, but also to help raise funds, to help build more wells in Kenya. And so we are saying, you know what, if you would like to get involved with this, you don't have to run, but if you'd like to come support, there's many different ways you can do that. You can go online, or you can stop by the hub and ask how you can be part of cheering it. There's a pep rally ahead of time, and we would love to see all the support we can as we just say, you know what, we are committed, and we want to see what God can do through our partnership there in Kenya. Now, it's going to be an exciting time down at the marathon, but I got to tell you, we have an exciting thing happening here also at Clinton Township. On October 18th is our kids' trunk or treat. Now, this is so much fun, you guys. This is a community event. Now, last year, we had this, and we seriously blew the doors off this place. We had hundreds and hundreds of more people come. It was truly incredible. It was buzzing around here. And it really is fun as we are just to be able to open up our doors to our community and say who we are and just show love by offering a really incredible event that's fun and safe for the families in our community. And so we would love for you to be a part of this. And so we are looking for people that can basically open their trunk and pass out candy. Now, I'm sure you saw some of the pictures that were up there and just the different ways people decorated their trunk. You can go all out, theme it out, or you can make it really simple. And honestly, at the end of the day, the kids don't care. They just want your candy, okay? So, but we would love for you to be part of it. We are looking for more because we know that all those people that came last year, they're going to come back this year, and they're going to bring their friends because that's how awesome it was. So we need a lot of people to help provide some trunks for that. Okay, so I've been talking a lot. There's a lot going on around here. But guys, there's something happening next weekend that is just for you. You've been hearing us talk about it. It is our Man Up Retreat, okay? Yes, it is the guys' weekend, okay? There's going to be meat, there's challenges, there's adventure, and whatever else you guys do. But it truly is an incredible weekend. We'd love for you to be part of it. And CT, I'm looking at you to bring home the Man Up Cup again, okay? So we need guys to show up to be a part of that. So you guys can stop by the hub or go online to register for that. Now, well, if you're out in the lobby by the hub and stuff, you guys are going to probably see some of our awesome Kensington gear. We got a whole new slew of things. So stop by, get some stuff. You can wear this when you go to work, wherever you want to go, and it's a great place to even wear it here, like when you come to midweek in a couple weeks, okay? We have that coming up. There's so much happening around this place, so I really encourage you to stop by the hub and get all that information. information there. Now, as we continue on in our service today, I would invite you to, at this time, to stand up and say hi to those that are around you.
Well, good morning, everybody. As we're in our second week of Why Bible, we're talking about the Old Testament today, so we thought it would be really fun to play a game. And so I have some volunteers that I invited. They're going to come up at this time. They can come on up. And so we're going to play a Price is Right game that we're going to call Pin the Event on the Timeline. And so what they're going to be doing is we're going to give them 30 seconds. I'm going to divide the room in half, like right here. So this side is going to have to help our volunteer on this side, and this side is going to have to help our volunteer over here. Can you do that? All right. And so they have some pictures of some Bible stories like Moses and the 10 Commandments, or Elijah and the chariot, or Daniel and the lion's den. And so they have 30 seconds to stick these on the board in whatever order they think it goes in. All right. Any questions?
That's harder than you would.
No, it's easy. What are you talking about? Get out of here. So we have Vicky and we have Beth, right? All right. So you ready? On your mark, get set, go. You got it. You got it. Okay. I like what you're doing. Okay. Let me hear you. Help them out. You're almost there. We got about 10 seconds. Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's give a cheer. All right, we're going to check. We got our answer key. So we have Adam and Eve. You got a point. Noah and the ark will go here. Moses and the 10 Commandments. Okay. 4. I'll give you 2 points. That's okay. That's not too bad. And then over here, we have Adam and Eve. That's okay. Moses does go there. David and Goliath. Okay. You got 3 points. That's all right. So, all right, we're going to have Lori, our stage manager, come out and bring a gift out for both of you. Thank you so much for playing. We have these Jesus Calling books that are going to be great for this series as we're talking about Why Bible. They're devotionals. And then we have an extra gift card for you so that you can wake up and have a little cup of coffee with your devotional. Thank you so much for playing.
All right, Beth said she got 2. Here's the deal. I don't think I could have got those right. Anybody think they can get them all right? Anybody think they know the whole Bible? Here it is. I got one of the bigger ones in my house up here. It's probably going to knock the stand down. Yeah, it's so big. But so here's the deal. As some of you know, my name's Dave Wilson. I was here last week. Anybody here last week? Yeah? All right. Here's the thing. There's a front row up here. We got 2 people in the front row. Nobody wants to get spit on? Come on. All right. I'm going to get on the next service. I got to fill this front row. But here's the amazing thing. Can you tell my voice is a little hoarse? And I've got water. Oh, no, I left my water down there. I'm going to go get that. But look at you guys coming up. Guilt is a powerful thing, isn't it? You guilt people into stuff. Hey, can you throw me that water? I rode my motorcycle here last week, and one of the reasons I rode it, you can throw it. Oh, yeah? I can catch. Even though I work for the Lions, I can catch a football. Just kidding. I don't work for them anymore, so I can joke on them now. So here's the thing. Last week I was here and rode my motorcycle, and I rode it because it said 40% rain at 1 o'clock, which is about when I'm going to be going back home. Like 40%, that's never true. That Weather Channel is never right. I get on my bike, don't even put any rain gear on because it's just barely sprinkling. I get a mile out here, downpour. downpour. I am so completely, I'm losing my voice in the third service. I told him I might not have my voice, but I get to Fridays, and I wear Shaner, I think, and I'm going to put on rain gear. I pull in, and I go, I couldn't talk. I didn't get my voice back till Wednesday, so I wasn't sure I'm going to be able to do this. So here's what I got to do. I'm going to cover, are you ready? The timer's going, so I got to go. I'm going to cover 39 books. In fact, you know what? Let's play a little Bible trivia, all right? How many books are in the Old Testament? Well, I just told you. Okay, you got that. 39 books in the Old Testament. So it's by the way, and you think I'm making fun of you. I did not know growing up around the church, but not really in the church, that the Old Testament was the first part of your Bible. It's the first section. It's the Old Covenant. Testament actually means covenant, and it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It just means it's a long time ago. 39 books in the first half of your Bible, actually 3/4 of your Bible, written by how many authors? You're not going to get any points for this. 28 authors over what time period? Take a guess. 2,000 years. Over 2,000 years. New Testament, totally different. 27 books, written over 100 years. It's amazing. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, right, in this Old Testament. Here's the thing. A lot of us are this way. We know a lot of Bible stories from the Old Testament, David and Goliath, Noah, that kind of thing. Many of us do not know the story of the Old Testament. So here's what we've got. We've got 10 icons on stage. By the way, the protection team here is amazing. You know, just even how they design to hang these things up. So you won't believe this, but I'm going to go through 39 books. I'm not going to get through each book, actually. I'm going to give you the flow, the story of the entire Old Testament in 31 minutes and 44 seconds. Think we can do it? We're not going to walk through the Old Testament. We're going to sprint through the Old Testament. And I'm going to use these icons. And all I really want you to do, you don't have to write all these things down, but I just want to give you sort of a big overview so that when next time you read into the Old Testament, some of you doing the Proverbs study, today's Proverbs 6, yeah, way to go. So you're reading one section of the Old Testament. It's called literature. Of course it's called literature, but it's called poetry. Is the Psalms, the Proverbs, and Song of Solomon. And then there's history, and there's the prophets, and the law, and there's all kinds of different sections. And again, I could do all that. By the way, if you really want to understand the Bible, and I mean this, we almost showed you a 12-minute video by these people, but there's a website on the internet called BibleProject.com, BibleProject.com. They do such a good job on the Bible, on any book, on any theme. It's an amazing tool for you. Okay, I'm talking too much. We got to go. So all I'm going to give you is sort of an overflow so that when you open up your Old Testament next time, you'll be like, okay, I sort of have an idea. Again, can I do this in 30 minutes? No. But I'm going to try to give you sort of an overflow. And a lot of these things you may know, a lot of things you may not know. So I don't even know if I'm going to use my notes or not, because I'm going to use these icons. So the first icon is an apple. Why? Because we got the book of Genesis. The first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, are called the Torah. If you're a Jewish person, you know the Torah. They had to memorize the Torah as little children. I'm talking 5 long books were memorized by 12-year-olds in the Jewish faith for years. And it starts with the book of Genesis, which literally means beginnings. So that's all it means. How did the creation story start? It started, well, we got an apple. We don't know if it's an apple, but it started with fruit. All right? And so what happens here is we got a man, Adam and Eve, and they are given free will by God. Now again, I don't know how the world was created. It says 7 days. There's arguments about, was that 7 24-hour days, or was that 7 long periods of time, theistic evolution? Was it? Nobody knows for sure. We just know God spoke the universe into being. He created Adam and Eve. Why do I believe Adam and Eve are real people? Because there's other creation stories. There's other creation myths and fables, and I'm sure some of you know that. And some people say that's just a metaphor for how it began, not real people. I believe Adam and Eve were actually real people. Why? Because Jesus referred to them, and Paul wrote about them in the New Testament. That's why. If you believe in Jesus, you sort of have to believe certain things, and one of them is this is how the world began. So here's the thing. God gives Adam and Eve free will. You can enjoy any tree in the garden, but don't touch this one. And just like your child and my child, they say, I can't touch this one, touch, right? And you do the same thing. So they touch the tree they're not supposed to touch, right? And what happens? We have our first marital conflict, right? We do. Because when they realize they've broken God's will and God's law, they have a conflict about it, right? God comes walking in the garden, some of you know this, And he says, where are you? And he finds him. And what does Adam say? He blames his wife. He says, the woman that you gave me, she made me do this. He's basically saying, hey, God, you don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to Apple Breath over here. That's who you want to talk about, right? And so there's a blame thing that happens. Well, let me ask you, does that ever happen in your marriage? Oh, yeah, it does. And there's a shame thing that happens in the garden. They now cover their sin. They cover themselves, and they hide. And I've said this many times in 30 years at Kensington. Everything you want to know about life is found in the Garden of Eden. Do we still blame? Yeah. Do we still shame? Yeah. And so as you look at the beginning of creation, in this long book, 50 chapters in the book of Genesis, it starts with unbelievable lessons. And I'm going to try and give you a lesson in every little icon, just a take home as we walk through this, because I don't want this just to be a seminary class. I want you to also learn something. And here's the big idea. They chose to disobey God. They struggled with obeying God, and we've been struggling with that ever since. Am I right? Every one of us has the nature of Adam and Eve, which is called a sin nature, a nature against God. We know what's right. It's hard to do what's right, and we sin against God. And we think we don't do this. I've told this story a couple times. Maybe you've heard this, but years ago I was invited through text by my buddy Drew Stanton, who played for Michigan State. They win yesterday? Forget it. Michigan State. Then he played for the Lions, and I had the pleasure of leading Drew and his wife Kristen to Christ and baptizing them. He's really a good friend now. He's with the Cleveland Browns. Anyway, he texted me one day and said, hey, man, I'd like you to play in my golf outing in Lansing. He does every year to raise money for a charity. And I said, because he knows me, I said, how much is it? Because I'm a tightwad. I don't like paying, So he said, oh, no, it's free for you. You'll be a celebrity. And I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, each foursome pays $1,000. They get a celebrity, a fifth person that I pair with that foursome, and then they play. But they don't know who the celebrity is until they walk up and introduce themselves. So I go, I'm going to be a celebrity? Drew, I'm not a celebrity. He goes, I know, but you won't pay, so you're a celebrity. So I go, right? And long story short, I mean, it's a long story, and I've done this many years since, but this is my first year. So I walk up, they tell me, go up to 18, whatever, and that's your group. I walk up, I say, hey, my name's Dave Wilson. They all introduce, and there's two couples. They weren't married to each other, but their spouses were working the tournament. And anyway, they finally look at me, and they go, so why'd you introduce yourself to us? I go, oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm your celebrity. And they look at me, and I'm not kidding. As they look at me like, you're our celebrity, Magic Johnson walks by. And they're like, so another foursome's getting him, and we get you. And so then they say, so what do you do? What makes you a celebrity? I'm like, well, I'm not really a celebrity. I'm a friend of Drew. I didn't want to say I'm a pastor because I knew it would freak them out. So I just said I'm a friend of Drew. And then they go, well, you must be more than a friend of Drew if you're our celebrity. I said, well, I'm actually a chaplain for Detroit Lions. They go, oh, and this one guy goes, so we can't curse and we can't drink. That's what he said. And I said, it even gets better. I'm not a good golfer. So let's go. So listen to this. We go out and we play, and trust me, I'm the best golfer of the five of us, and that doesn't say much. But anyway, we get to hole 10, and we're getting ready to putt, and this woman who's in the other cart walks up to me, and she goes, hey, so Joe here says you're like a marriage expert. I go, what? No, I'm not. Says you're writing a book on marriage. You speak about marriage, you and your wife. She goes, I've got a marriage question for you. We're standing on a green getting ready to putt. Okay, and I said, what is that? She goes, well, I'm in my second marriage. She goes, what's the problem with marriage? That's what she asked me on a putting green, and I'm supposed to answer in like a minute. So I'm like, God, help. And I look at her and I go, oh, I can answer that with one word. She goes, really? What's that? I go, selfishness. And you will not, I couldn't have scripted this. She looks at me and she goes, you are so right. My first husband was so selfish. That is word for word what she said. And I go, I'm not talking about your first husband. And I go like this. I go, I'm talking about you. And she goes, and I said, and I'm talking about me. Now, here's the thing. Was selfishness in the garden? Yeah, it's another way to describe sin. And guess what? You've got it, and I've got it, and I haven't even had it. We, in fact, inherited it from our parents. And your parents are Adam and Eve. It came all the way through. And if you're a parent, you know every kid has it, and you think you outgrow it. You never outgrow it. So what is God going to do with this? Here we go. We're back in the garden. And I don't know if you know this, but in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we read the story of Eden. And in Genesis chapter 3, God deals with their selfishness, with their sin. What's he do? Anybody know? Chris talked about this a couple weeks ago. I know he's talked about this because I talked about it already in the same weekend. He covered their nakedness with what? Anybody listen close? Chris talked about this. Animal skins, which means he killed an innocent animal. Blood was shed by an innocent to cover the guilty. Now, I don't know if you know this, but in Genesis chapter 3, the third chapter in the first book of 39 books in the Old Testament, God starts something that he's going to finish later. Right there it is. Most of us read it and we don't even catch it. We're like, wait. Is God doing something? Yeah. God always initiates reconciliation. We don't initiate it. God initiates it on our part, even when we don't want to. That's the big idea, I think, of Genesis. You find out God moves toward them even when they're running away from God. What happens? Have you noticed? This whole thing is held together by a red thread. I asked for a red cord. Why? Because from the very beginning, you see a thread of blood, or a better word, Jesus is all the way through the entire Old Testament. And it starts in Genesis 3. Your offspring will crush the head of Satan. He starts right there. You read the curse, you read the whole thing. It's like, what is God up to? Nobody knows at this point, but you and I do. We have 20/20 hindsight. We're living in a day and age. It's like what God started here, he is going to take all the way through to the New Testament. The whole thing, Jesus is on every page. And he starts here, and he's going to be through the whole thing. If you read it well, you see Jesus everywhere in the Old Testament. Now, some of you are like, you took a long time on the first one. I'm going to go a lot quicker. I just want to establish something that's very, very important. You've got to understand the thread, the red thread, the line that God has started. So how's God going to do this? Well, some of you know, you go to Genesis chapter 12 and God starts to reveal his plan. He's going to do it through a nation, through a family. Who do you think this is? Not Adam and Eve, it's Abraham and Sarah. That's what they wore back then. They wore little dresses. All right, I'm just kidding. But it's Abraham and Sarah. What are all these? These are descendants. He takes Abraham out. He says, look at the stars of the sky. Look at the sand. You're going to have as many descendants as this. And he's like, I'm 80 years old. My wife's not pregnant. Trust me. He's like, I don't believe this. Sarah actually laughs. Anyway, long story. I can't get into everything. But God delivers on his promise. She bears a child, and they have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau. I mean, there's a whole lineage. If you study the Old Testament, you find out there's this thing that begins through a person and a family. The Jewish nation is going to be the lineage, the genogram that's going to carry all the way to the end. Jesus is going to come through this family. I'll never forget in seminary, never forgot this concept. God always has a remnant. God always has a remnant. No matter what's happening in your life, you think things are falling apart. In a nation, in a country, God always has one or two that he will deliver his promise through. And he starts here with Abraham. I could go into so many different stories. I mean, here's the amazing thing about Abraham and Sarah and the rest of their children. Were they perfect? Oh, no. You talk about messed up. I'm telling you, if you want to feel good about your family tonight, instead of watching NFL football today, just read the book of Genesis and read about the corruption. He lies and says, she's my sister. And says, you can have at her. She's my sister, not my wife. I mean, that happens twice. And then his son does it. And then, one of them, it's just craziness all over the place. And when you read that, you feel better about your family. You thought you were dysfunctional. You're not even close to dysfunctional when you look at that. I got to go back to my notes and make sure I'm covering everything. But it's just crazy. And here's the thing. When God always uses a remnant, here's the big idea for me from this stage. And this is Genesis 12 all the way through into the book of Exodus, second book, is if God can use him, he can use you. Here's a better way to say it. If God can use me, he can use you. And I know some of you don't believe that. I'm too messed up. I come from too much of a broken family. I'm telling you. You're looking at a guy, some of you know my story, who grew up with two alcoholic parents, who got divorced when I was 7 years old because my dad had many girlfriends, took me on trips with his girlfriends when I was 5 and 6 years old while still married to my mom. And we split up. Family blows apart. Moved to Ohio from New Jersey. My dad was an airline pilot, flew out of New York. We moved to Ohio. Why did we move to Ohio? I didn't know, but my mom had her parents in Ohio. So we moved to Ohio because she's now a single mom in the 60s. There were not very many single moms in the 60s. Just my mom, me, and my little brother, and he dies of leukemia 6 months later. So it's just me and my mom. And because of my insecurity with having no dad in my life, I'm not blaming that, but I spun out of control. Ended up in jail in high school, ended up just partying, womanizing, you name it. I got into college, and I didn't know this then, but I realized later, the Bible actually says in the book of Exodus, the first time we read it, it's in Exodus chapter 20. That's where you find the 10 Commandments. We're going to get there in a second. It actually says the sins of the father will visit down the family tree to the third generation and beyond. I didn't know that was in the Bible, but if you would have looked at my life in college, you would have said, that young man is never going to turn out well. In fact, I didn't know it, but if I would have looked in the mirror, I would have said, I am turning out just like my dad. Drinking, partying, using women for my own advantage as the big quarterback on campus. I could do whatever I wanted, and I was spinning the same place. But God has a remnant, and I'm part of it. He literally changed my life, junior year in college. And now the Wilson legacy, I get to change. It's not a legacy of adultery and alcohol. It has changed. And I'm not saying it's perfect, because our family, just like your family, has sins and things that go wrong. But let me tell you something. God always has a remnant. He works through imperfect people. He's working even now today through an imperfect person. And if you don't think God can use you, God can use you. All you have to say to God is, yes, I'm yours. I'll do and go anywhere you want. God will change your legacy. Okay, I'm getting way off. Okay, here we go. So we got creation, we got this thing, we got Adam, so this remnant starts. And then what happens? Part of this family is a guy named Joseph. Remember Joseph's in the Technicolor, Technicolor, Coke, whatever. You know, Donny Osmond, okay? So you got it right? That's Joseph. He's the favorite son of Jacob, and there's a long, big story. He ends up second in command in Egypt, because he's sold into slavery, this whole thing, right? He's in Egypt, and so all of Israel has a drought, and they have to go to Egypt to get food. They end up in Egypt, and it's an amazing story, by the way. And if you've never seen it, go to the play. It's awesome. The music's great, and it gives you the story. But they go to Egypt because they have to get food, and they end up finding out that their brother, who they sold to be killed in slavery, is actually in control. And so all of Israel ends up moving to Egypt. Pharaoh realizes there's so many Jews now under my control. If they come in and somebody wants them to partner with them, they could overtake this. So he puts them in slavery for how many years? 430 years. 4 generations, 400 years, 30 years. But you see, this is broken because after the end of that thing, God raises up another man, another remnant. God's always got a remnant. He raises up, let my people go, right? Come on, you know these songs, right? That's Moses. He's the guy. And I just say this, God always provides a way out. God always provides a way out. You think you're stuck. You think you can't get out. God always provides a way out. And they were enslaved, and he provides a way out through Moses. He brings the 10 Commandments. Actually, some of you see Monty Python. You know, it actually was the 11 Commandments. He was bringing them down from Mount Sinai, and he stumbled and dropped. He goes, I got the 10 Commandments. So anyway, that's a joke. I just try and throw a little humor in here because this could get really boring as we go. Oh, my goodness, I got to fly. All right, so here's the thing. You get to the end of Genesis. I remember my seminary final on the book of Genesis was, what's the theme of the Joseph story? And I was finishing these notes even this week, and I'm like, Genesis 50:20. I'll never forget it. Where Joseph said to his brothers, when they bow down before him and say, please forgive us for what we did to us. Joseph says, anybody know? It'll come up on the screen. This is what he says. I got an A on the final because I remember this. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. What a great idea. You think bad things are happening in your life. God's behind it going, sometimes those things happen because you made bad choices or things spin out of control. But God can say, I can take all things, even bad things, and use them for good to accomplish my purpose in your life. I've said many times here in 30 years, if you ever heard me preach, you probably heard this theme. Steve Andrews say this is one of my themes of my life. Trials can make you better or bitter. The choice is yours. Trials or adversity or storms can make you better or bitter. Let me ask you, do you know better people who've gone through something really horrible in their life, but they're better? They have incredible faith. And you're like, I don't know how they did it. They chose to believe God. Do you know people that are bitter? Probably, you know, more people that are bitter went through the same trial, and they're like, how could they get through something? And they became bitter. They became better. Because God can do that if we trust him. And that's what Joseph did. And so this amazing story is Joseph, figures that out. And then Moses leads them out of slavery. And then what's this? What do you think this is? This is a real estate deed. They end up in the promised land. Joshua, the book of Joshua. They walk into the promised land, which is an amazing, amazing story. God had promised them, I have a land for you. I have a people for you. I have descendants for you. Part of it is actually going to be a geographical place where it's going to be their land. That's why Palestine, Israel, all that, it all happened over there. That was the promised land. But it's interesting. Some of you know this. When they got to the promised land, God says, go in and take it. Anybody know what happened? This is in the book of Numbers. They said, well, we better send spies in to see who's there and see if we can take it. The spies go in. They come back and say, man, the men in there are so big. We're like grasshoppers to them. We can never take it. They go, Moses, what should we do? Should we go in? Moses goes, I think we should listen to him. And Caleb and Joshua say, no. God is bigger than them. Let's go. And they say, no, let's not go. And God says, okay, I was going to give you the land, but you're going to wander for 40 years. None of you are going to go into that land except Joshua and Caleb. And 40 years they wander. And then finally, 40 years later, Joshua leads them into the promised land. And I had a thought about this one. It came to me late last night. I know this was from God. Because I'm like, what happened? They got to the land and they didn't take it because they were afraid of what they saw rather than what God said. You ever been there? I see things in my life, but God says, what am I going to trust? What God says in his word? What God said to me? Or am I going to trust what I see? What do we usually do? In fear, we see and we pull back. And I remember the VeggieTales song. You know which one it is, right? Because God's big. You can trust God even when it looks like you can't. God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than God says, and the monsters on TV. I'm telling you, God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than the Come on, anybody know what I'm talking about? That's what they forgot, that God was bigger than the boogeyman. And here's the thing. I'm having fun, but here's the thing. You've got something in your life right now that has filled you with fear. I know you do. And I could be there too. And here's what you got to remember. God is bigger. Here's the truth that I would leave with you out of this section. It's not the size of your faith that matters. It's the size of your God. Think about that one. Jesus said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, which is minuscule, you can say to this mountain, move. I'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the New Testament. But he says, you don't need big faith. You just need to enlarge in your view of God. We need a big God, not big faith. We can have very little faith, but if our God's big, you can walk in and take the land. You can walk in and save your marriage. No, you can't do it. He can do it. You can walk in and get over that addiction. You can't do it, but he can do it, right? That's all in this crazy little promised land deal, right? So then they move into what's called the period of the judges or referees, right? They have whistles and they tell people when they're out of line. There's a whole section of your Bible called the period of the judges. Some of you know some of the judges. Deborah, where else? I'm putting down Samson, Samuel, Gideon, Deborah. These were judges. They were just people that God gave them to help referee their life. And here's the amazing thing. They spin all through the Old Testament in a cycle. One pastor I listened to, Ed Young Jr. in Dallas. In fact, I got to give him a lot of credit for these 10 icons because he's the one that I watched and I go, man, I can use these 10 icons a little differently than he did, but it was a great message. And he calls it the sin spin cycle. It's like they went into this sin spin cycle in the book of Judges, and these judges tried to get them out of that. But here's the sin spin cycle, and we still do it today. We know what's right. That's the first step, right? We know what's right. You can pick up the Word of God and find out what's right. Your parents told you what's right. Teachers told you what's right. You know what's right, right? So first one is we know what's right. Second step is we choose wrong. We don't want to. We think we won't, but we often choose wrong. That's called selfishness or sin, right? Third step is we're devastated, or there's consequences, and they're bad consequences. Parents, you tell your kids all the time, good choices, good consequences. Bad choices, bad consequences. That's what happens. We know what's right. We choose wrong. There's bad consequences. But here's the deal. If we repent, we're forgiven. That's the cycle. You read the books of the judges, that's what went on over and over. They knew what's right. They chose wrong. There were bad consequences. They repented, and then they were forgiven. And that's the amazing thing about God. He keeps forgiving us. Why is that true? We found it out in the first section. He always initiates what? Reconciliation. He's always initiated reconciliation. Even if we take one step toward God, he's taking 99 toward us. All he needs is a glance, and he's running to meet us right where we are. And that's what happens over and over in the period of the Judges. And then we move into, at the end of this section, into the sort of the second half of your Bible in the Old Testament. You run into the Kings period. What happened is they say to God, we want a king just like the other nations have. And some of you know this. God says, no, I'm your king. You don't need an earthly king. I know you're our king, but we want an earthly king. How about that one? He's tall, handsome, and good looking. His name is Saul. Can he be our king? God says, okay. And he gives him a king. And you know the story, right? The kings of Israel didn't do well. Saul didn't do well. Then son comes after him, and he's elected the next king. He defeats Goliath. He's a military hero. His name is, everybody knows David. So everything he touched turned to gold. And it's interesting, of all the people you could talk about, David's probably the most known king of Israel. In fact, Jesus comes through the line of David, and he's really well known, not just for his good things, but also for what? He's the guy that had an affair with Bathsheba, murdered her husband. His son Absalom has an affair with a sister. I mean, it's an ugly, ugly spin. Again, if you want to feel good about your family, just read about these, because it's like, whoa. You're kidding me. These are the people that the line of Jesus is going to come through? Yep. God always uses broken people. And, I thought I'd stop here just for a second, because I've talked about David many times, and I'm named after him, in a sense. Here's a guy that was supposed to be at war. He stays at the palace, and he sees a woman bathing naked and says, go get her. And here's the thing. That decision that he should have been there, but he's here, got him in so much trouble. I actually wrote down in my notes, if you want a thought, and I know you and I, we all deal with this, playing with temptation leads to devastation. Playing with temptation leads to devastation. Think about this. If David would have been where he should have been, this whole thing might have been avoided. This whole legacy could have been avoided. But it hit me years ago. I wrote this down. It said, when we are not where we're supposed to be, we see things we're not supposed to see, we do things we're not supposed to do, and we pay more than we ever wanted to pay. I told you I was going to give a couple thoughts throughout the Old Testament. You never thought God would speak to you today. He's speaking to somebody right now. I know he is. Somebody right now is playing around with something you know better. You know right. You're choosing wrong. You think there'll be consequences, there will be bad consequences. And if you don't repent, I don't know what your legacy is going to be, but I can tell you what my legacy almost was. Because I was playing with things just like my dad. And when you're not where you're supposed to be, trust me, it starts there. On the internet, in a hotel room, at a bar, you name it. You step into a place you're not supposed to be. You're going to see things you shouldn't see. You're going to end up doing things you shouldn't do, and you're going to pay more than you ever wanted to pay. That is one of the lessons you will learn from all the Old Testament, but specifically from David. I remember asking my dad one time. He was up here visiting. My dad has since passed. I said to my dad one time, we never talked about the divorce. He was actually going with me to a band rehearsal. He was a drummer, and I was a bass player. So we're going to this band rehearsal for Kensington, and we're driving there, and I said to him, I remember driving, I said, hey, Dad, do you ever regret the divorce? Before I got the word divorce out, he looks back and he goes, hell yes. I was like, whoa, that was visceral. I never thought he regretted it, never talked about it. And I said, why is that? He goes, because it ruined my life and I missed out on you. You know what he was really saying? I wish I would have never been where I shouldn't have been and saw what I saw and did what I did, and now I'm paying. I don't know who's playing around with something right now, but learn from a king who it didn't go well. And then what happens to the kingdom? It splits into a divided kingdom. Israel in the north, Judah in the south. There's decades of split kingdom. It's a divided kingdom. And God sends prophets. That's where all the prophets come in to speak to the divided kingdoms. You got Jeremiah, you got Isaiah, you got Micah, you got Malachi, you got Habakkuk. You ever heard those names? Those are all books in your Old Testament. Written, the words of God. A prophet was the mouthpiece of God, and God sent these men to speak to the nation basically about their sin. Most of the prophets brought warnings and condemnation. If you don't return or choose right, there'll be bad consequences. In fact, when they saw a prophet coming, they're like, shut the door, don't let him in. Don't let her in, because he's going to bring bad news. Because why? Because they were usually doing sin. It's like a kid when the parent comes. You're like, oh, you put everything away, right? That's sort of what the prophets were. They were the mouthpiece of God. They were trying to pull people back, but often they just spun out of control, and they end up with a split kingdom. I tell you what, when you choose different kings, you end up in disunity. And that's what happened. And it's really interesting. You know, it hit me again late this week. One of the books that's all about the prophets is a book called Isaiah. It's a very long book in the Old Testament. Isaiah was an amazing prophet. And one of the things I want to show you real quick is one of the things Isaiah says toward the back of his book in Isaiah 53. It's known as the suffering servant passage for us scholars. I'm a scholar now because whatever. For us theologians with a master's in this stuff. If you go to Isaiah 53, again, remember I said there's this thread all through? Here's another one that most people missed. But they also had to hear these words and go, what is he talking about? Isaiah says this in Isaiah 53 and verse 3. It says, he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. But he was pierced for our transgressions and he was crushed for our iniquities. So if you're listening to that, you're like, well, what's he talking about? He. See, the ones that were pierced for our transgressions in the Old Testament were who? Animals. There was an animal sacrifice system set up. Remember, blood has to be shed for the forgiveness of sins. So priests would go into the Holy of Holies where the presence of God was, and they would shed the blood of an animal to cover the sins of the nation. But now Isaiah is saying he will be pierced for our transgressions. What's he doing? He's prophesying a prediction that would come true hundreds of years later. He was on the punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed or made right with God. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was punished. Look at this. He was assigned a grave. That sound familiar? See, you and I know who this is talking about. He was assigned a grave. That means he died, and he was given a grave with the wicked and the rich and the death. And it says, after he suffered, he will see the light of life. Doesn't that sort of act like the person who died is going to come back to life? This is in Isaiah 53. We can now look back with 20/20 hindsight and go, you mean that's about Jesus? Yeah, it's in red. And be satisfied by his knowledge, but my righteous service will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. So way back here in the divided kingdom, we have a book called Isaiah, and there's little things like this peppered in, excuse me, that when you read this, it's amazing. I heard about one Jewish woman that went to synagogue, and she said they always skipped from Isaiah 52 to Isaiah 54. They skipped Isaiah 53. And she went up to the rabbi one time and said, why? And they said, well, many people think that chapter is about Jesus, and we don't believe that. Maybe you're a Jewish person today. I would say, study it. Find out what you believe that's about. We obviously, in a Christian church, believe that was a prediction which was fulfilled in Jesus. So here's the thing. Assyria comes in, takes over, and takes all the Jews to Persia. They're evicted out of their country. You know this is, in fact, a famous person in this whole thing was Daniel. Ends up in Babylon. And he takes some of the choicest Jews and put them in power. And you got Daniel in the lion's den. You got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember, anybody know these stories? Daniel 3, Daniel 6, they're amazing thing. They wouldn't compromise, said, bow down to our king, because now they're in a country where they believe in different gods, and they're Jews, and they're like, I can't bow down to this. One of the amazing stories of my life is when they would not bow, no compromise, God honored them. Hillsong just wrote a song called There's Another One in the Fire. When they throw Shadrach, Meshach in the fire, they say there's one in there like the Son of God. Yeah, Jesus in that fire with them. Even though they are thrown there to be burned to death, they don't burn. Why? Because when you don't compromise for God, God always provides and takes care of you. That's one of the amazing stories in this. But then there's a U-turn. They come back. Why? Because Cyrus the king says basically, as he's taking over their throne, he says, all you Jews are here. Do you want to go back to your homeland? Go back. So they all go back to their homeland. And then you get to the book of Malachi. Last chapter. Anybody know what that symbol is? God is silent. Book of Malachi ends. That's your last book in your Old Testament. Some people that are Italian call it the book of Malachi, but it's Malachi. Okay? Just kidding. So there you are. And by the way, it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well. They start in a curse. You go 39 books later, they end in a curse, disobeying God. And it's interesting. In the book of Malachi, it's sort of famous because there's a chapter in there where God says, you have robbed me. And I say, what do you mean you have robbed? How have we robbed you? And he said, in tithes and offerings. You give your money to pagan gods, and you don't honor me, the one true God. Sounds like a verse to take an offering, doesn't it? Yeah, we're going to take our offering. Seriously. And I'm not going to guilt you into that, but let me tell you this. As the book of Malachi closes, there's 400 years where they don't hear from God. I just want to say this. As you give back to God right now, I said it last week. Thank you. So many of you give. And some of you are new and you're like, I gotta spend some time here before I understand your mission if I want to give. And maybe you need some time. Maybe today's the day you say, I'm in. So you just can do it that way. It's very simple. And you can give and you can join and you can honor God, unlike they did in Malachi with your tithes and offerings, saying, I'm going to trust God with my money. And so as they take this down, they're going to rip this down because we're going to close this today with just a beautiful song. Here's the thing. This, phone on silent type deal is very interesting. And I'll just say this as they take this down. Often you and I can believe when it feels like God is silent that he's not present. But I'll tell you something. God is always present even when it seems like he's far away or distant or silent. Because even though they didn't hear directly from God for 400 years, God was behind the scenes doing amazing things, getting ready to usher in the new covenant, the New Testament, the 27 books that we're going to look at next week, as he walks us into finally bringing to completion that red line he started all the way back at the beginning. He is threading it through the whole time. And even though it seems like he's silent, no. He is present, he is at work, and he is doing things in history. And I'm telling you right now, he's doing things in your life as well. He really is. And so even as you sort of land and walk through the Old Testament, I just say this. There is a Father that adores you all the way through the Old Testament. And I know there are times you read the Old Testament, it's like, man, this seems like a scary, judgmental God. And there are reasons for that, but all through, there is a loving Father caring for his people who continually turn away from him. And by the way, you and I are no different than they were. We continually turn away, and God continues to initiate reconciliation. And primarily, he does it through a person, Jesus, which they didn't even know about. They could only hope about. You and I actually know him. And I'll end with this. As you listen to this song is so beautiful. I remember the first time I heard this song, So Will I. It's a long song. I don't know how Aaron memorized all these words. I really don't. But as you listen to them, and I mean it, listen to them and sing them. It is the gospel from beginning, for God speaking the world into existence, all the way to the last verse where he now speaks to you and I through Jesus. It's so beautiful. And if the stars were made to worship, so will I. The animals were made to worship, so will I. Because there is a God who has pursued you from before you were born, and he's pursuing you right now. And the question is, will you worship him as your Father? The second you say yes, God says, okay, let's go. I've got a journey. I've got a mission for you. You will not believe. When I got on my knees in my dorm room and surrendered my life to Christ, I had no idea that decision would put me right here with you at Clinton Township today. Now, my journey's going to be different years, but God has a calling on your life, and he says, all right, you're in, okay, let's go. And I'm going to take you on a journey that's going to be all about this red thread, Jesus, what he can do in you, but just as important, what he can do through you. As you and I, so will I worship him.
There at the start, before the beginning of time, spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star a signal fire of grace. If creation sings to your praise, it's so alive. So alive. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Yeah, yeah. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every pain in the sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys, you're so alive. So alive. Oh, so alive. If the stars were made to worship, so alive. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. The rocks cry out in silence, so will I. The sum of all our praises still fall shy. We'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. Yeah, yeah, and as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you gave your life so I could find it here. If you let What measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.